This is Sharing Your Story Part 2, Putting Pen to Paper. This is one of our workshop series for Application Week. My name is Will Torres. I'm one of the admission officers here at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And over the course of today, my hope is we will all get a better understanding of how writing fits in the application process, especially if you're thinking about the GSB. So in session one, so starting your story, I talked a lot about getting an understanding for what is your quote unquote big picture. What's your journey? What does it look like? If you look backwards, what were those footsteps? What did that trail look like? What was the environment around the trail? Look upwards, what's your North Star? Be comfortable with all of those details and spaces. So that's a lot of detail. So how do you distill that into the written parts of the application? It sounds like it's going to be a tough situation, but I hope that by the end of today, you are going to be inspired to kind of think deeply, try different things and see what fits, what feels good, and pursue those and allow that to channel and focus your energy on what you're putting down on paper. So that's what we're going to be doing today, session 2, putting pen to paper. So a little bit about today's session. We will be recording it and posting it to our YouTube channel. So I definitely recommend to check that out. It's one of those hidden gems. There's a lot of great content, both in terms of admissions, as well as what's campus life like. In lieu of visiting campus in person, sometimes these videos are some of the best glimpses of the things that happen and the energy that you're going to experience during your time at the GSB. So over the course of the day, I'm going to talk a little bit the writing. What does it look like? How does it fit in with that review process, the holistic review process that I've been talking about every session this week? We're going to talk about content and style. Notice that I'm not breaking up our sections into essay 1, essay 2, optional questions. We will talk about those, but even this structure is intentional. My hope is that we are going to think beyond just, what matters most to you and why, but think about each opportunity in that writing landscape as a chance to tell us something about yourself. Definitely going to talk about tips, takeaways, tactical, practical, and I've tried my best to weave in questions that we've had through the week and over the course of my career, were the ones that I've seen rise to the top pretty frequently, and embed those into today's session. So let's get this going. Preface, there is a lot of advice out there. Take everything with a grain of salt. Take even the advice that I'm giving you today with a grain of salt. This is not an end-all, be-all, and this is the way to get into Stanford session, but rather my hope is to provide different frameworks, ways for you to think through, step back and kind of tackle it from a new direction if you get stuck. This is really to empower you and try to help you self-coach through this process. So this also, I can only speak for Stanford. Some of the tips and recommendations, in all honesty, are also mine. But hopefully these are things that you can also use throughout your life, whether you are applying to school, or maybe you're applying to a job, or you're just thinking about what's coming next in life. Hopefully some of these things will come in handy along the way. So writing in the holistic review process. This is going to be a definition that you've seen through the week. Holistic. Characterized by comprehension of the parts of something as intimately interconnected and explicable only by reference to the whole. What that means in the admissions process at Stanford is that we are taking a look at everything you submit for us to really get to know and understand you. It's not a process where we're looking at one thing, kind of screening from there, looking at another thing and passing it through, but really taking all the pieces to really understand, okay, how do these elements of context come together for us to understand, okay, here is how this individual's intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal qualities and contributions come together. In our evaluation process, it is not a formula, it's not an equation or algorithm. There are no benchmarks, cutoffs, or quotas, so we're not saying, hey, we need X amount from this industry, or we're only going to take X amount from that country. That's not how it works. We're really looking at you as an individual, trying to bring together a talented, dynamic, exciting group of people to learn and kind of grow together. No one part of the application necessarily means more than another. And I think this is where sometimes that essay starts to loom really like darkly over like your anxiety, over what can happen next. It is not a make it or break it piece. We are using the essays in conjunction with the other parts of your application to understand who you are. We are not grading your written portions as good or bad, but really using those as an opportunity to learn more about you. That's one of those things that I really care about, learning about you. So when you're out there kind of doing research, hearing things, talking to people, and you hear someone say, hey, this is the essay that got me in, kind of take that step back and realize, okay, that's an essay as part of an application that got them in. I've been in this line of work long enough that I do remember applications, I do remember people, and sometimes I hear people say that I see them kind of in newspapers or publications, and I remember those files, and sometimes it's like, oh, all right, that's a cute thought. So some people get in despite their essays, and some people are unfortunately we're unable to admit despite a really well thought out, introspective, really like thought out essay. So really take it as a whole, really blowing up those parts. Admissions recommendations are made on the evaluation as an application as a whole. If I didn't hammer it in enough, let's highlight that last part as a whole. Okay. Intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, personal qualities and contributions. These are the things that we are looking for throughout your application. So if you haven't done so already, check out the evaluation criteria section of our admissions webpage. There's a lot of really great language to help unpack and really give you new perspectives for how to understand these somewhat kind of mushy like phrases and really see how they might come to life for you. So in our application, that's where we're looking. All of these different pieces come together for us to get that picture of who you are, how you're going to show up in that on campus. When it comes to writing, you're really going to be focusing on these 4 parts: essays, resume, activities, work, history, and optional responses. Notice that I highlighted that section, did a little bit of kind of shading there to really highlight it's optional. We have admitted people who have not filled those out. We have admitted people who have filled them out. It really all depends on your journey, the things that you're trying to share, and the information that you want us to know about you. So I'm going to hit pause there for a second. If you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of how the holistic review process works, can you jump into the Q&A box and type in the name of any animal? Just throw it in there. I want to make sure that hopefully people are getting a sense for the theme that's happening. Awesome. Let me see, zebras, pandas, elephants. There's actually no reason that I chose animals other than to keep y'all on your toes. If you do have questions about the holistic review process, think those through. Please put them into that Q&A box as well. I go through the questions afterwards to see, hey, where are other places that I can work on to make sure we're able to convey the knowledge and information that we need to. So any information, questions, animals, I love animals, just pop them in there. So thank you for letting us take that quick time out. Now, let's talk writing. So content, like what is it I should be writing about? Remember that big picture of who you are? How do we start to figure out which details are gonna be the most helpful? So I often get asked questions and they fall into a couple of buckets here. Like, should I be talking about personal things? Should I be talking about professional things? What's the right balance? Should I focus on details or a bigger picture? The answer I give is surprisingly common across all of those. And it's up to you. Why this is such an open-ended answer is that everybody has their own journey. For one person, your response might be informed more by your personal experience. For someone else, that balance might swing more towards that other direction. And for me to prescribe some kind of percentage or balance or way that you should be kind of answering these, I think takes away some of that agency and really does you a disservice. But that doesn't mean we're leaving you hanging. So take the questions as your guide. Think of them as your friends. We put in a lot of effort to make sure that the questions are asking what we're looking for, and we're really not trying to ask for any hidden questions. It's not a trick at all, but really, how are we learning about you through the lens of this question? So let's go through that in a little bit more detail. Let's give it a little some meat on those bones. So what are these sections asking? Here are those kind of major written portions of the GSB application. Let's start with the resume and the activities and work history. Here, we're really trying to understand what have you done personally, what have you done professionally, and I like to think how these two work together. I've often heard people say, hey, it feels kind of redundant. There's information that I'm copying back and forth. Um, and then I like to step back and think, these are two opportunities for you to share information with us. Take a look at those two materials. Do they necessarily have to say the exact same details word for word? Yeah, things like your title or the times that you worked and where might be the same, but there are different types of information that you can convey using both pieces. So if you think about it that way, use it as an opportunity to, think through, what do I want Stanford to know about me? Let's do this in a little bit more. Again, I'm not going to leave you hanging. So, what should you include here? Again, up to you. By that, I mean, you're the only one who knows what are the most meaningful things that you've done. What are the things that you find the most important? What are you proud of? And then as you think about that, like, why are you proud of it? How did you get to that place where you were able to do those things? Some of those musings that can come handy later on as people are curious to know more about your life. What are some of the things that shaped your perspective? There is a question in our application about, hey, what perspective do you bring to the class? We'll talk a little bit more. I'm stumbling because I want to make sure I get that phrasing right because the wording is important to help you understand what we're trying to get to. And then impact. We talk a lot about impact, and that can mean anything like, how is whatever space you're in, how's it different from your presence? What are things like scope, scale, depth, context? What are some of those details that might be handy for us to know about you? If in doubt, if it's important to you, it's important to us. So let's talk a little bit again, step back, that holistic reminder. We do not have a preference for where you worked, what organizations you belong to, what school you might have gone to. So it's not about the name or stature of that organization, but what are those footprints that you have left behind? As you think about that and connect that with the intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, personal qualities and contributions, all of those things, background agnostic, context dependent. And what do I mean by that? Those three things can pop up anywhere in your life. And one of the things that I love about the Stanford evaluation process is we'll recognize and celebrate that wherever that might be for you. So maybe it comes with your church involvement, your mosque, your synagogue. Maybe it's in a club or organization. Maybe it's something you do at home. There is a lot of leadership competencies that you might be expressing in your home situation as well. So never underestimate the different places that you might be making an impact. That context piece is that the way that some of these qualities might manifest is going to look different depending on where you are. So leadership might look different if you are a current college student versus if you are working and you have been with your company for 9 or 10 years. Just because you're in different places in your life doesn't mean one is more or less valuable. We just understand it will look different, and that's okay. We want you to kind of understand where you are because that's where that starting point for growth is. Okay, let's talk resume. I know we often focus our attention on the essays, but for the GSB application, it is like a standard business resume. Try to keep it to one page wherever possible. That said, there are some unique circumstances, extenuating circumstances where maybe 2 pages might be appropriate. So the first one that people tend to think about is if you've had 10 or more years of work experience. Another one, Sometimes you might have had publications or like a book, or you've written articles, a white paper. And those citations, as you write them out, like who are the authors, what year was it, what was that journal, that takes up space. And so, yeah, personally, I think that's helpful information, and I know our staff does as well. So sometimes there's instances where it might be appropriate to go kind of into that second page. Again, we trust your judgment. There's a flexibility here. We're not going to dock you because you go onto that second page, but really try your best. One page, being succinct and direct and clear in what you're trying to communicate is also a skill set that you're going to need to leverage as a business leader. So there's no better place to start practicing that than your resume. Visual impression. So this is already trending us into that like style and how do I approach it. This kind of overlaps in that Venn diagram. But if you're thinking about content, how much writing should I put in there? Step back, take a look. Is it helpful, or are you hoarding and just adding all that detail? Right? We are humans reading on this end of the spectrum, on this side of the table. So make sure that as you're writing, things are clear, that's easy to read. You can definitely shrink margins if you need to, but sometimes that tiny, tiny font or cramming in a lot of words can make it really difficult to pull out the critical information that I should be learning about you. We do not have a resume format that we require or ask you to do necessarily. Similar to the way you all have different journeys through life, sometimes that does necessitate a little bit of creative license and freedom to make sure that you're able to convey it in a way that's appropriate for you. Some industries might emphasize one thing, others might emphasize another. We want to make sure you're able to kind of speak your truth in all of these spaces. So I have a little exercise here. I actually really love doing resumes. This is something, this is like a thing that has come about pretty recently. I think it's really fun. So we're gonna play a game. It's called Who Do You Know More About? We have two individuals, all right? Individual A and individual B. A manages an aquatic conservation program. That is that bullet point on their resume. Person B, in that same bullet point space, created a public-private action plan that saved 7 fish species from extinction. This might be a little obvious, and I don't want to be too facetious with it, but I thought it would be kind of fun to throw up a poll. So I'm going to put that out there. We're going to launch it. Who are you learning more about from these 1 or 2 lines? Okay, it seems like it's a pretty clear answer. There's a couple of folks that are putting in A, which is fine as well. But my point with this is there are ways for you to describe the same job. Like when I made this example, I actually have the same person in mind, and this is something that I often see in resumes. So I'll go ahead and stop this poll. Thank you for entertaining that thought. But when you're in your resume, what's that bullet point doing? Is it describing what you do, like versus what did you do? There's a slight nuance there. Sometimes when you're describing, like, these are the things that I do, it's more of a job description versus, hey, here are the things that I have done. What are some of those impacts? That's when you're starting to see, if it's quantifiable, that's when the numbers come into play. So really try to think about impact and how you have left those organizations different or changed them. And that might be one way for you to think about, okay, how can I get maximum mileage out of that limited real estate on my resume? And again, each one of you has a different format. Just ensure that it's clear, easy to read, and that the things that you want us to know about, you can take those away. All right. Now let's get into the essays and the optional responses. I know there is a lot of questions, myths. This is where a lot of myth busting happens. And so let's go here, right? Let's get deep. Let's get in the weeds. So let's start with the essays. What matters most to you and why? And why Stanford? Earlier, I talked about letting these questions be your guide. And notice they are not prescriptive. They are not asking you for what matters most to you in a business context. It really is what matters most to you and why. I'd like to encourage all of you to emphasize and why, because that is the question, that's what we're asking. There is a difference between what matters most to you and here's evidence for it versus here's what matters to me and here's that introspection and reflection that helped me really understand, who are you because of. We did an exercise in sharing your story one where we listed different things and kind of talked to them as individuals saying, because of you, I am, and really helping you unpack how those instances might have impacted who you are, right? And that's where that what matters most to you and why comes from. Dean Moss talks about a body of research that says some of the most successful leaders out there are the ones who lead from a place of mission and values and purpose. What are yours? This internal dialogue that you are engaging with in this question is also going to be reflective of some of that internal dialogue, that world of feedback that you're going to be engaging with at the GSB in that leadership curriculum. Why should someone follow you? Draws that attention inward, and hopefully this question is doing that as well. Why Stanford? 2 words, so many places you can go with them. Maybe the subtext here is why Stanford for you? Again, center yourself in all of the responses. Some folks might, the mission might resonate for them. For others, it's because their ability to explore and pivot into another place is going to be facilitated by the stuff here. We have no expectations. We don't think one rationale is more important or compelling than another. What I want to learn about is what are your motivations for coming here, right? And so that's where that comes from. I want to learn about you. Okay, there are the optional responses as well. And so where these came from, I think helps illustrate, how we're thinking about the essays and these responses as a way to learn about you kind of, in a really interesting way. So what we found in the past is that the what matters most to you and why essay, people were putting in their accomplishments in there, which, definitely things to be proud of, but they didn't always necessarily connect with the things that mattered to them. So it almost felt like they were shoving a round peg into a square hole. So that's where these optional responses came in, especially that impact one. We want to create a separate place because we do want to know about that. We do want to know about the impact you've created. But we also want you to be able to answer the questions kind of with honesty and truth, right? And not have to try to squeeze or kind of mix things up just to get all of these bits in. So what are these questions? Oh, there we go. Think about times you've created a positive impact, whether in professional, extracurricular, academic, or other settings. What was your impact? What made it significant to you or others? Pretty clear cut here. We're asking you directly. And one of the things here is that you don't necessarily have to use flowy prose. Take how much space you have and how much runway as a clue to like, hey, maybe this is where I can be more direct. Maybe I'm just giving the facts so that they know kind of right away what's going on, what's the context, scope, scale, why is this meaningful and significant? The second one, tell us about a time within the last 3 years when your background influenced your participation in a situation, interaction, or project. Again, very clear about kind of the context and circumstances that we're asking you, but also very open-ended when we say background. That could be anything about who you are. Again, in session one of starting your story, we practiced and went through a couple different exercises so that you might be able to think through, okay, hey, who am I? And what does that mean as I think about both business school and life beyond? And that could be one place to go if you'd like a little bit of inspiration if you want to go through this optional question. Okay, I'm going to call this section Quick Questions. So this is actually drawn from things this week. And we're going to speed through this and hopefully it'll cover some of the questions that you have in the Q&A box right now. So do my essays have to connect? What if I talk about the same things? Will it be redundant? We're going to go through these one by one and we're going to hammer them out. Do my essays have to connect? The answer is no. Sometimes the things that matter the most to you aren't the reasons that you want to go to Stanford, and that's fine. We want you to use those spaces in a way that makes the most sense for you. What if I talk about the same things? Will it be redundant? So you can talk about the same thing, especially if you're coming from it from different angles. There might be details about maybe a bullet point in your resume, some of that contextual, situational, kind of those ripple effects that you might want to include in your impact questions or somewhere in your essay. Or maybe there is something you refer to in your essay, but more in that personal sense. But there is also impacts and repercussions of it. Maybe that's where you add additional detail in the impact side. So really thinking beyond just one part of the application to really understand like, hey, these are different ways I can add depth and nuance, even if it's about a single thing, right? Sometimes those single things can be really meaningful, both for you and the people around you. How vulnerable is too vulnerable? This is up to you. This one is a little bit, again, up to you. I would say, what am I learning about you through this process? Again, it's less about what and more about the so what. Who are you? What am I learning? I really appreciate this question. I get asked it a lot. My own like personal request is you only need to add the amount of detail to let us know what is going on. I really appreciate that because you never know who's reading on the other side, and you want to be thoughtful to not potentially trigger other experiences they might have had. So just be thoughtful. That goes for like the details that you're adding as well. Give us enough so that we understand the situation, and then focus on, you. What if my story is complicated? Sometimes this goes hand in hand with these other pieces. The additional information section can be your best friend. Maybe it is a term during college where you had an extreme health crisis. Maybe it was something else going on in your life. Maybe it is some of these extenuating circumstances that inform something that you've written, but don't necessarily fit in with the flow that you have. Use that additional information space like judiciously, but include any relevant bits of information that you think we need to know so that we really understand you. Bullet points are your friends here. This is not additional essay, it's additional information. Be concise. Again, let us know what you think we need to so that we really understand your circumstances. How much explaining is too much explaining? I kind of referred to this in some of our previous responses. What am I learning more about you, or am I learning about the situation? In the holistic review process, I want to know about you. And who will see my writing? So the admissions staff and you are the only people who are going to see it, and whoever you share it with personally. We don't share this with faculty. It's not part of the evaluation process. We are trained professionals. Not even your alumni interviewers are going to see it. All they see is your resume, and you know exactly what goes on there. So know that this is a safe, confidential space that if you do want to go somewhere vulnerable, or if you're talking about something maybe for the first time, if it's something that, maybe the world doesn't know about you, but you want to discuss it with us, you can. And we're not going to be sharing that with anybody. Okay, so that was quick questions. How do I stand out from the crowd? This is that next question I get all the time. So center yourself. I talked a lot about that. Embrace your journey and be true to your reasons and rationale. Discuss the things that are meaningful for you. Just if I had a quarter for every time I said the word you in these presentations, hopefully that's an indicator for where we're going with like what we're hoping we're getting out of this journey with you. So, and dig deep. Right? This is where those interesting bits come out. This is where, even if we all say something like family, the way we've engaged with that and your own experience with family is going to be different from mine. It's going to be different from everybody on this call. So really go there, kind of understand the who's and how's of what you are. So we're going to do a quick exercise. You might have done this with me before or somewhere else. If you have done it in the context of the GSB application, try it with a different topic. But what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to turn my camera off. So if you want to grab pen and paper so you can jot something down, open up another browser, or just think along, I'm going to turn my camera off so that I don't distract you too much. I want you to be able to get into that zone. I'll give you reminders and cues for what to do next, and then we'll take it from there. You don't need to think about it too hard. Just really the first thing that comes to mind What matters to you? Lowering the stakes on this question, it doesn't even have to be what matters most to you, but what matters to you. Just give you a couple of seconds so that you can jot something down there or think your way through it. All right. Now let's get to the fun bit. Why? I'll give you about a minute so that you can jot your thoughts down and really start to unpack your first response. All right. Start to wrap that thought. Take a deep breath. Give yourself a moment because I'm going to ask you another question. Why that? So you just gave me what matters to you. Why? Why that? Think if there was a child asking you, sometimes they're asking why. Bring that childlike sense of curiosity to this question. Go ahead, start wrapping that thought up. Take another deep breath, let that one out. Take me one level deeper. Why that? All right, so go ahead and complete that thought. I'm going to continue because we have some more content that I really want to share with you all. But if you get stuck and you're just curious and you want to try something different, try this. Continue, ask yourself again, and then ask yourself again. Get down to that fifth why. Usually, even by the third, fourth, fifth why, those are when you're going to be talking about things that only you can talk about. And you don't necessarily have to put those things in the application, but as it broadens your understanding of things, maybe there are a lot of things that matter to you. Maybe try this exercise and see what are is there a fundamental common theme across them. You might be surprised at what you find, right? So we don't have a preference for how you approach this. We don't have a preference for what you share. We just want you to share what is most important to you and why. I know there's a lot of questions here about the spirit of the question, and we did talk about that briefly. Whether or not to do a series of short kind of responses or kind of one cohesive big thing. Again, That is up to you. We trust you to use that space to really reflect what you want us to know about you. So I want to empower you to take that space and make it your own. To unpack this exercise a little bit further, this is something we did yesterday, again, referring back to sharing your story one, starting your story, where you can use this as an exercise to think about, okay, what am I learning about myself from that thing that I just thought about? What can I do next with it? So splitting this up into process and outcomes, was that the answer you expected? From there, you can ask things like, why did this answer go that way? Did it take a left turn? Did it take a U-turn? Did it stay like straight and true on track to what you thought it was going to be? If it was different, how? Maybe the track still went in the same direction generally, but there was a couple wiggles in there. What does that mean for how you're thinking about that? And I think this part's also important. How did you feel? Right? Registering the way your body responds can often help you understand, okay, where are places that could be interesting to go and explore a little further, right? In that spirit of the self-discovery, maybe going somewhere a little uncomfortable and going into that personal stretch zone. So when or where was it harder? And then on the other side of the spectrum, where was it easier? Where did you find that energy and where did that light you up? Because that could be another area to chase if you want to figure out, okay, maybe what should I be writing about? So next, if you want to do this as a further exercise, like there's multiple steps that you could do with any of these. Either try writing for a full 2 minutes and just keep that, choose one of these questions. Write for the full 2 minutes answering it. You want a challenge? Write for a full 5 minutes. Just keep writing and don't stop. Another version, knowing that some folks are actually verbal processors, maybe talk through it. Talk to somebody, answer them, talk to a screen, talk to the wall. If you would like to talk to a friendly face, please feel free to stop this video at any time that I'm smiling. I will always be there for you to listen as you practice this. So shifting over into style, tips and best practices, we're just gonna go straight there. If you're planning for the future, maybe you are thinking maybe 1 or 2 years away, maybe you're just not sure, you can still prepare. So practice developing your written voice. And that just means practice. Write things down. There are definitely journals out there that have built-in questions that you respond to. Maybe you have a personal kind of blog or it's something you do every day. Like practice. It's going to get easier and easier. I know for many of us out there, there might be cultural, familial, community. Talking about yourself might feel a little uncomfortable. And in the application process, we want to know about you. Like if that hasn't been clear yet, like I want you to embrace that and take it as an invitation to really focus on yourself in this. Allow yourself to have that exploration, make time for that introspection. And through it all, read anything. I am a big proponent of reading. That's how you absorb and see how other people use language. And from there, that can often help help inform the way that you write, type, and think. Once you're in the weeds of the application, there's a couple of things here that I would definitely highlight as well. Consider your audience. You might be an expert in your field, and we have seen a whole lot of fields, and you might be doing something that might be very niche. What are ways that you can translate some of those things into something that anybody can understand? So that if you're talking to a stranger on the street, or if your grandmother or someone who has no understanding of what you do, you could explain to them and they could say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. It's possible. And remember, think about who is on the other side. I would also include this as sometimes there might be slang, or when you're thinking, how formal, how informal can I be? This is still a business school application. You want to put a professional forward, but that doesn't necessarily mean everything has to be formal language. It doesn't have to have necessarily a formal structure. The what matters why essay in particular lends itself to a little bit of creative license if that's where you want to go. If you would like to convey it in a, intro, body, close kind of structure, and that works for you, go there, right? So just know that this audience, professional foot forward. When one is technical, too technical, I refer to that a little bit. Acronyms will also fall under this umbrella. So make sure you spell things out, or are there other ways to communicate what it is, especially if it's very important? If there's not, and it's very important, additional information could be a place to go, but don't use additional information as a glossary for acronyms so that you could save space later on. You want people to know what's going on in any single spot of your application to the extent possible. I mentioned you don't have to write the same way in each one. What matters most and the optional responses are a great example of that. Where what matters most, you can use a little bit more freeform language, be a little bit more informal. You can be more direct and really just tell us what the details are in some of these spaces where you have less space. And through it all, the best voice is your own. And that's why I said earlier, like practice. Write in a way that feels natural to you. There's a difference between constructive feedback. Stanford is a huge place for feedback. As long as that final thought and intent and idea is yours. If you become if other people's ideas start to cloud that, if there are other contributions there other than your own, that's where it becomes inappropriate coaching. And sometimes that's the place where we actually lose some of the most interesting and kind of transparent, authentic, genuine elements of who you are. So feedback, great. Be true to yourself, use your own voice, and trust your judgment through this. Okay, more tips and takeaways because I am all about that today. If you need a push writing, mix it up. Try walking. Sometimes walking can help jog your memory or jog your creative juices. Pun not originally intended, but I'm going to go with it. I'm someone who processes by movement, so lean into that. For some folks, speaking might be better. Take a recorder, record your voice, use a transponder, type it down afterwards. Whatever works for you, go there. Resist the urge to copy and paste. And here, not so much because, a name might be lifted from one application to another, but each school has a different spirit, energy, and thing that might draw you to them. So if you're writing, a fresh response for that school, that helps you channel that and ensure that, it doesn't feel generic or something that can be applied anywhere. And that's going to be of great service both to you as well as whatever admission officer is reading it afterwards. That'll help them see you as someone in their community. Again, reinforcing the idea, it's not how quote unquote good or bad your writing is, because that's subjective. What I'm looking in your reading for is what can I learn, like in your writing, what I'm reading your writing for is what can I learn about you? And that is where kind of that maximum value is. What you want us to know is always gonna be better than what you think I want to know, okay? This goes for both how you convey and what you tell me about your past experiences in your resume, what and how you write in any of your responses. I do not have any preferences here. You have ownership. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, in the Q&A about, do we have preferences on how we approach things? And the answer is no. We want to make sure you have enough license, enough landscape, a blank canvas to really let us know who you are. And I know that can be both kind of liberating or terrifying, depending on the way you approach it. But I think it can be a great opportunity. Stand up, own that story. If in doubt, if you're not sure where something is going, maybe it feels like something has gone off track, but you're not sure what it is, ask yourself, so what? Why am I even writing about this? What is the message I'm trying to convey here? Does this actually sound like something else I've written in this kind of piece here? So can I change it? Should I change it? So what? That can be an incredibly powerful tool to check yourself, step back, and look at things from fresh lenses. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Be true to your journey. Yours is the one that we want to learn about. Yours is the one we want to hear from. And I'm going to leave you with these parting words before we jump into the Q&A box. Everyone has a different journey to Stanford. Everyone has their own journey to Stanford. So will you. Take that, let that settle in, let that simmer. If you haven't done so already, and of course, I'm going to go into this plug space to mix it up from that feel good, is check out my Stanford.MBA. This can be a great place for you to learn more. There's an application tracker. And so great tool, but another great tool that I really enjoy is that Q&A box. So that's where I'm going to head to next. So I referred to it here. There's a question. What if there's multiple things that are important to you? Does it have to be one thing? Um, like I said, there's creative license for some people. Yeah, it might be a lot of things. Is there something that encapsulates that? Technically, the phrase one thing suggests one thing. So again, however you want to approach this, I have no preference. Take it. Take it and run. What matters? That you're right. It doesn't even say what's one thing that matters. Hey, go with the question. Does admissions view non-standard writing, say interwoven poetry, for example? Use it judiciously. I have seen instances where quotes, excerpts, prose, something more creative has been inserted. But you also don't want to have something dominated by that. This is not a creative writing program that you're applying to. Um, as long as you're answering the question and I know what I'm getting out of it, and I know what your response is, kind of that's the core of the style and the extra elements that you want to put into there. Um, if you do decide to go a little bit more creative, this might be an instance when you think about, also showing that you can be direct and clear in other spaces of your application, right? So even thinking about, this is how it's really meaningful for me, and I want to express myself this way, and I can also talk this way. Up to you. Um, So from Nikita mentioned, you never know. When I referred to you never know if something might be triggering for someone else. Sometimes there might be details. Sometimes if they're very graphic details about instances where there might have been violence or situations like that. If someone is reading that or hearing that, it might bring them to that space and also make them feel uncomfortable. It's okay to write about difficult instances in your life. What I would say is keep it at the level of detail so that we understand what happens. You don't have to go into that graphic element, but just enough so that we know. And that is just a general kind of guideline that I offer to people. You don't have to take it, but remember, this is almost like a one-page conversation that we're having with each other. And you also want that person on the other side to feel comfortable as they're reading yours. So I would also use that as a plug for, if I'm talking about something controversial, don't be controversial to get a rise out of someone, to get their attention. It's about, what am I learning about you from this process? Hopefully that was helpful. I know that can be a kind of fine line to draw, but again, trust your best judgment there. Um, Question from Daniel. From my exercise, is it more appropriate than or should you be for primary job? So how much detail, like when we're asking about what is your primary job responsibility, that is one where I would say we're asking about your job responsibility. So that can definitely be where you put manages aquatic conservation program. But in terms of like I was more referring to like bullet points on your resume, because that's where we want to know what you did. And even in impact questions, you got it right when you were interpreting that question. All right. And then in terms of the process, and I want to kind of come back to the holistic review process. And I know that this has been a recurring theme. It doesn't really matter which part of the application we're reading first, because we're going to be looking at every single piece of it together to understand who you are. No one part is that gateway piece, not even an interview, right? It can feel like sometimes that interview is a make it or break it, but that's not how it works. We'll hear back from the interviewer, and then we'll look at that kind of report in conjunction with everything that you submitted. Same goes for this application. So if you think your way through it, we want to know you throughout. So take yourself out from that mindset, take ownership of the things that you can do here, And please know that we are reading with your best intent in mind. We are reading to admit, not to deny. And so, with that, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, this was helpful. Hopefully, I didn't inundate you with too many details. If you have questions, we have many more events both this week and throughout the summer above. And feel free to send our office any questions, comments that you might have, as well as feedback. It helps us provide events like this that can be as helpful for you as possible. Thank you. Stay safe.